So we've been playing your song Very Well here on Fresh recently, which is actually your debut single. Now,
Hmm.
I guess first things first, introduce yourself. Who is Cassandra? What kind of music do you make?
Yeah, so I'm a Latina. I was born and raised in Orlando, Florida. So, I mean, when you're from Orlando, that's like the little Puerto Rico of, the United States. So, that's where I was born. So, some of the influences growing up is like ABBA and like Florence and the Machine, like really Tumblr 2013 indie. So, I am an indie artist. I love bass guitar, I love live instruments. That's something that I'm like working towards for my project. But yeah, I'm a Latina indie artist based out of Atlanta currently. And yeah, I just make music for self expression, anyone else that feels like they relate to it, and, just trying to be a normal human being and,
Mm.
write about the human experience.
Mm. And I understand that not only are you a singer and songwriter, but you're also an animator and designer. In fact, you've designed your own merch. Can you tell me a bit about how all those things coalesce together in your artistry and in your life?
I always wanted to be a singer when I was younger, but unfortunately, insecurity and just not being set up for success to even like know what that journey looks like because I didn't grow up with people who did music. I saw, in school, like middle school, high school, like people being great drawers and, painters and things like that. So when I left high school, I joined a drawing class in college, and my teacher was like, you need to like do this. Like, you're so good. This should be your profession. And so I just went with it because I was like, wow, like, someone sees potential in me. So, all of college, and then 2018, I quit my job and I was like, I'm going to be a designer. I'm going to like design for, smaller companies and brands and, hopefully like the music industry. So, like, it was always like the end goal was always to be in the music industry. I loved music so much. I just didn't know what my potential could be in the space, So, I started designing for a bunch of local smaller artists, doing their cover arts, doing their merchandise, growing and learning and understanding the music industry from the design and marketing level. And then eventually when, I realized like, man, like I've always written poems, I've always written songs, like I want to pursue this, So while I was like designing for people, I was writing music, I was working on stuff when I moved to Atlanta in 20, I guess the end of 2018. Yeah. I met a bunch of music people and I was working on their stuff. And one day we were in the studio and someone was like, do you sing? And I was like, I do, but I don't know. I haven't really like I haven't recorded anything. I've never really worked on anything. They're like, let's just mess around and play with it. And so I ended up recording my first song and I was so excited. And it was just, I couldn't not see myself do that. So how they've cohesively like lived together, the few years as I've been growing is, I've been helping other people. I've been able to like design my own stuff and, you know, thank God I've been able to like, have a sustaining career that can really pay for, my regular living as well as my music career. So I'm honestly really blessed to, have the experience I did with design because I feel like it prepared me for the artist that I wanted to be because I saw a lot of people who had to like, let go of parts of themselves to be an artist. And I was like, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to stay true to myself. So it's kind of like how Very Well even came about. So yeah.
Mm. Yeah, speaking of which, I want to talk about that song because you were just mentioning earlier how you, I guess, needed some more of that confidence to become an artist and fully embrace your talents and your gifts. But very well, now I came across this song. I don't know how I came across the song. Somewhere I think on Instagram or something. It was probably from one of the mutual artists that you're mentioning that you've worked with. But
Hmm.
it's such a confident song, about I guess self confidence and loving yourself. Tell me about the
Hmm.
process, about how you got there and releasing that into the world, because I imagine that would have been quite scary.
Oh my gosh, yeah, no, extremely scary. So, yeah, so like I had mentioned, insecurity has always been like a little hanging has you like angel or I don't know, something on my shoulders that's always weighed pretty heavy. I really struggled as a kid. I was definitely an outcast, definitely a weirdo. I was definitely like a theater kid. Like I hung out in the band room, like, in that
I love
creative
that.
space. Like now I get to look back and I'm like, I was the cool kid. But then I was like, I don't know, I don't really fit in. I mean, I have friends in different spaces, but insecurity was really big. And I even struggled with acne for a long time in my mid 20s. So it was pretty, rough on just the terms of like being on the internet, being something, wanting to even like, become like a dent, like something on the internet, like an influencer or designer, whatever I wanted to be, like your face is the face of that. And, I wasn't confident. So I went through a really tough time. I moved to Miami after living in Atlanta for about like 8 months, and I went to go work on music. And I was around a lot of really great songwriters. I don't know if you know Clesso. He's based out of Miami, Florida. He's a Christian artist as well. And it was around a Clesso, this guy named Romar Jesse, and just a lot of people who, I mean, are amazing writers, and they talk about a lot of vulnerable and sincere experiences. And being around people like that, it challenged me to like, explore what it meant to write about this experience of being insecure and not having confidence. And it took me a long time, but eventually, me and my boyfriend right now, what up RG, I came back to Atlanta after living in Miami because of the pandemic, and we actually wrote very well during the pandemic. And it was like at the time I had processed all of like, what it meant to be a vulnerable songwriter, what it meant to like express these, I don't know, these pains or these things. And, we got together and we were just like, we're in the middle of a pandemic. Like, we're just going to write this. We didn't even have intentions of it being an actual like final song. It was more so like a ode to like who I wanted to be, who I wanted to like see myself as one day. Like, it was almost like a manifestation of like, if all comes to like greatness and whatever, like I want to sing this song to like my future self, so that way I could look at that person and be like, yo, like congratulations, like you worked so hard to like own your beauty, own your identity, own who God has made you to be, and not care what other people think, because that was also a really tough thing for me. On the internet, I always felt judged and felt like I had to be perfect, and I was like, I just want to be me. So
Mm.
very well was, it was writing to my future self, and to anyone else who struggled with identity issues, struggled with beauty, especially for women. I mean, being in the internet right now is so difficult because there's just like this image you have to uphold. And especially then, I feel like now natural beauty and being yourself and, being very off guard and organic and not having these over edited photos are finally like coming to light. But then it was so like catered to like
Mm.
being and looking your best all the time. So that's how it kind of came about.
Hmm. I love that.
Yeah.
I mean, even now there is that element of filtering your life and or filtering the images that you put and the way you look. But I'm sure you've received um, a lot of responses from this song. What has the audience said? Well, not just responded to this song, but just your music in general recently, or
Yeah.
even at a show. I think you've done. Did you do your first show
Mm-hmm.
recently?
Yeah,
Yeah,
oh my gosh, yeah, last month, and I have my second one this Friday.
that's so exciting. So, how did that go? What's it been like seeing your fans face to face and also interacting with them online?
I think the coolest response I've had from Very Well was this guy was saying that because it came out a little bit after the pandemic, so obviously it was like a interesting season for many people of like getting back into the world. And so this guy reached out to me and he was like, hey, like I just want to let you know, like Very Well has been such a beautiful song to my mother, because my father passed away during the pandemic from COVID, and she's been struggling with what her role is. Like, she's lost her husband, beauty and all these things. Like, it's such a hard topic to explore when you're, so vulnerable, and, mourning, your best friend. And he was saying every morning she would put it on to start her day, after she would like listen to a podcast or like on her way to church. And he was just so grateful because he was like, man, like it's so refreshing to find music that it's out of a spiritual, a, yeah, I don't even know what to call it, like a spiritual Manifestation, I don't know, it all leads back to God, because if I know
Mm,
who I am, in Christ, then I get to be who I want to be, and it's just cool to see how it's like impacted people. But
mm,
meeting people in person, the event or the show that I did last month, it was really cool to see how, yeah, I have been working with so many people that are just in so many amazing places, and I didn't even realize how blessed I was to be in certain spaces. I used to design for this artist in the hip hop industry, and she was a dancer, and she's, coming back into the music space, and I actually got to meet her, and I was her graphic designer when she like went viral. Like, like I helped her make the content that kind of helped her be the person that she's now known to be. And so I got to perform, and she was there with her sister's girl group, and my other friend, she was a huge supporter of my income when I was freelancing, like for the first few years. And so it was like a beautiful moment of like, man, these are people who have like rode with me through like all of my journeys, haven't judged me, only supported me, and like they're going to continue to support me because like they love my soul. Like that was the coolest thing, is like a lot of them, some of them are believers, some of them aren't. It was definitely a different setting, but a lot of them were like, you have such a beautiful pure soul, like it's so refreshing to run into people like you. And that was like, it was almost like a challenge and a reminder of like, I want to continue to be that person in all spaces, wherever I go, wherever
mm,
I get to sing. I want to be a breath of fresh air. And I mean, ideally, like I hope that they can feel God, from my
mm,
presence. I hope that that can be a thing. So yeah,
mm.
it's beautiful, honestly.
That is really beautiful. Especially that story you said about yeah, the guy's mum who was really
Yeah.
touched by that song. Yeah, you never know who your music is going to reach, and of course it doesn't, age and gender, ethnicity, none of that is a barrier. You just talked a
Mm-hmm.
little bit about how your faith plays into your music and your intentions. Um, and also, as you mentioned, you're Puerto Rican. Could you tell me a bit more
Mm-hmm.
about your background and how that also plays into your artistry?
Yeah. So, um, my faith, it's who I am. I grew up a Catholic. That was like that was that was my first experience of like what believing in something meant. And it was a little rough. Going to the the altar and confessionals was very intense as a kid. I used to be so traumatized from them. I don't think that they really prepared me to like understand things fully. So I was young, so I was in private school till like fourth grade. Then we lived in an area called Kissimmee, which is now like the heart of Orlando. It's like that's like little Puerto Rico. And like Orlando's like, okay, like it's the city, but it's still like we still have a little bit of the island here. Growing up, a lot of my family was in Puerto Rico. I had like my cousin, my tios, they all lived in Orlando, but my family's very interesting. We're not like the huge Latino family. We're more so like, where's a little bit of us? No one really had kids. The great aunts, they didn't really have a lot of kids. They were like devout Catholics. And so I don't have like the traditional Latino experience growing up. Now looking back, it formed who I am, because a
Mm,
lot of who I am is my community. It just looks different because I didn't get to grow up like traditionally speaking, like speaking Spanish in my house to my family. I didn't really get to grow up like, I don't know, going to Puerto Rico like every summer. Like I was there often, but it was definitely different. But growing up looking back at it, I'm like, man, I'm really grateful because it's given me such a like passion to speak up for other people like me who don't feel like they don't feel like they identify with being Latino because they didn't get to like have those experiences because of troubles with their parents or the family. There's a lot of family problems when you are Latino that kind of just happen and you don't really see people, because whatever it was. So I think it's
mm,
shaped a lot of who I am in terms of like owning who I am now, because
mm.
Latino people are very outspoken, like they're very very confident in what they say, and that was something I had to work towards. But I will say it's shaped a lot of how I see people, how I treat people. Like I treat people like their family. If people come over, I'm like, my fridge is like open, whatever you want. And I think that's something
Mm,
our community does really well, is welcoming people and loving people, no matter like who you are. And so,
mm,
yeah, I'd say it's an everyday. Like you just wake up and you're like, this is who I am. So
mm. Mm, I
Yeah.
love that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and you're obviously doing it. Well, I shouldn't say obviously, but I feel like, yeah, you're doing it for yourself. Like, as in, you have to enjoy what you're, like you said, you have to like what you're making. But also, I think if you're constantly seeking the approval of others, or even,
Yeah.
subconsciously, what will people think about this, what will people say, or whatever, then it can
Yeah.
really mess with your creative
Mm-hmm.
process, I imagine.
1,000%. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. I told myself, I was like, if I'm doing this, I'm doing this for me. And if, if I get any attention for it, like, praise God, that's so cool. Like, hopefully
Hmm.
people resonate with these things and, they can identify with like these experiences that help them self-reflect or challenge themselves or grow. Like, I think that's always the like goal, but I want to always have fun with this. Like, I don't want this to
Hmm.
feel like a rat race. I'm not into
Hmm.
that.
No, that's a
Yeah.
very good way to put it. Before I let you
Hmm.
go, I want to chat about your latest single, Dimelo. It's a beautiful song. I understand you also wrote it with RG. Tell me a bit about
Hmm.
this one.
Yeah, so Demon Law, it's vulnerability. I think that very well is vulnerable in a sense of like this is like my story, but now Demon Law is like vulnerable in a sense of it's like our story. So yeah, I think that like I don't know, people I guess like in general, I feel like within the last few years, people finally started like sharing parts of their relationship. And I say that in a sense of like maybe like just seeing people with people and, people actually like being comfortable with saying that they're dating someone. I feel like there's always been like a weird looming like mystery around like dating. And, I told RG, I was like, if we're going to be together, like, of course, like, we value privacy. Of course, we value that. But when it comes to songwriting, like, I feel like it's our duty to, like, guide and lead others about, like, the honesties in relationship. So we wrote that song again during the pandemic. I think we were just navigating what it looked like to actually be, like, two adults trying to, like, be like, all right, we really care for one another. Like, how do we make this work, without having I don't want to say great examples because there are people who have been great examples to us of like what it means to be like in love and to share a marriage, but like in the culture of society and the culture of how things are and the nature of that, like we don't have a very committed culture. People like things for like a week and that's it. It was like we
Hmm.
were learning so much of like what it meant for us personally to be committed and to be in love with one another and to explore like childhood trauma, and so it's like wrestling with things that you don't feel comfortable yet to share with this person because you care about them and you're like, wow, like it's a whole other level of vulnerability is like to be honest about like inner challenging things that, you would have never discussed if you didn't realize like, oh, I kind of am like working through childhood trauma and didn't even like realize it. And so, yeah, we were in therapy for a long time, not because of bad things, just because we really wanted to do this right. And I think
Hmm.
Dimelo is like a beautiful, I don't know, like expression of that time of us like understanding what it meant to truly say, like, I love you and I want to be with you. And it's not going to be easy, like we're still young, we're still figuring this out, but like, we have God and we have, the trust of one another. And let's continue to be communicative and be honest and work towards being better individuals for ourselves and for God and come together at the end of the day and say like, all right, like we're still in this together. So Dimelo is
Hmm.
like it's like a vulnerable expression of that time, but it's also like a place for people to feel like they're not alone in terms of like maybe things that they're experiencing in their relationships with their marriage, and maybe even just like wanting to even explore what it means to date and if you're ready to, and if you're not at that place to be any of those things yet for someone, and that's okay. So I think it's a very reflective song, but at the same time it's very very catchy. So like if anyone hears it,
Hmm.
it could just be a song that plays in the background, but for someone who is a conscious listener and is an intentional listener, I think it is a great opportunity to like have a check out like where you're at with like the idea of relationship,
Hmm.
community, love, things like that.
Hmm. Cassandra, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you today. Thank you so much for sharing about your music, and I'm very much excited to see what comes next for you.
That means so much. Thank you. This has been such an honor, and I'm just excited. I it feels so cool that people can listen with me and grow with me, and I'm just like, man, this is like crazy, you know? Little me would be like, wow, like we're actually like walking into like things that we really want to do, and like we're not letting anything stop us. It's like, so thank you for giving me this opportunity to like let my inner child like live its best life.
Oh, I love that so much.
Yeah.
You're absolutely welcome.